Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the 2024 Giller Book Club. My name is Jacob Alvarado, and I'll be your host for tonight. Just a quick reminder at the top before we get started to please make sure to have your Zoom on a side-by-side view for the best possible experience. Now it is my profound pleasure to introduce you to our interviewer this evening, Rebecca Makkai. Rebecca is the author of last year's New York Times bestselling novel, I Have Some Questions for You, as well as 4 other works of fiction. Her previous novel, The Great Believers, was a finalist for both the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award, and was the winner of the ALA Carnegie Medal and the LA Times Book Prize, among other honors. A 2022 Guggenheim Fellow, Rebecca teaches graduate fiction writing at Middlebury College, Northwestern University, and the Bennington Writing Seminars, and she's artistic director of Story Studio Chicago. Tonight, Rebecca will be interviewing Deborah Willis, whose fabulous novel, Girlfriend on Mars, was longlisted for the Giller Prize last year. Please also feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen as the conversation unfolds, and there will be time to answer those questions at the end of the night. Anyway, I don't want to take up more of your time, so I'll hand things over now to Rebecca and Deborah.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on what I think is a sultry summer night for most of us in the Northern Hemisphere. I'm going to read Deborah's bio and first of all, just say that Girlfriend on Mars, the book that we're here to discuss, was a finalist for last year's was a long list selection for last year's Giller Prize. And I was privileged to be one of the judges for that selection. And so I'm thrilled to meet Deborah. We've never spoken before. I'm really excited to discuss the book. Her last story collection, The Dark and Other Love Stories, was longlisted for the Giller Prize as well. Her first book, Vanishing and Other Stories, was named one of the Globe and Mail's best books of 2009, was shortlisted for the Governor General's Award for Fiction. Her work has also appeared in The Walrus, Virginia Quarterly Review, the Iowa Review, Lucky Peach, and Zoetrope. She has worked as a bookseller, yay, at Monroe's Books in Victoria, BC, as a technical writer, and as a writer-in-residence at Joy Kagawa House in Vancouver, MacEwan University, and the University of Calgary. Deborah currently works as an editor at Freehand Books and lives in Calgary with her partner and daughter. And at the start of the hour, we're going to begin. Deborah is going to read a statement about her participation in tonight's event. Because this is her event, she is the one reading the statement, but I want to say ahead of time that these are sentiments that I echo, and they are ones that are actually quite relevant to the book and to the discussion that we're going to have as well. So we'll be revisiting some of these ideas later on.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I'm also thrilled to meet you. I also want to thank the Giller Prize for their support of the long-listed books, and to everyone who's present tonight. And yes, I know it's unusual to begin with a statement. It's kind of an unusual situation. I'm not sure if people here are aware of sort of things that are going on in the background. Anyways, yeah, I will explain. The statement is a long one. Please bear with me. But I believe that we cannot in good conscience have this conversation without mentioning the writers who have boycotted their own book club events. They refuse to participate in these Giller events because of the Giller's ties to Scotiabank, which holds an almost $240 million investment in Elbit Systems, an Israeli arms manufacturer that produces weapons currently being used in Gaza. So at the time that protesters peacefully interrupted the Giller Prize Gala in October, Scotiabank held a $500 million stake in Elbit Systems, and it has recently divested by half. So as noted in a recent article in The Walrus, this may be because of pressure from artists to divest. And, you know, I'm not here to talk about the origins of the war in Gaza or the history of the region. That's not my area of expertise at all. I also want to be clear that I'm not here because I endorse any views about the war that are espoused by individuals behind the Giller Prize or Scotiabank. I can touch very briefly on my views. I believe that both Israeli and Hamas leadership are responsible for war crimes, as evidenced by the ICC arrest warrants. And we're currently witnessing a humanitarian crisis in Gaza so severe that the UN Human Rights Council considers it to be, there's reasonable grounds to call it genocide. I mean, my feeling is that every death shatters families and devastates friends. Every death deserves to be mourned. I personally think often of the mothers who've lost their children and the children who've lost their parents. So for these reasons, I also want to push Scotiabank to divest. So then the question is, why am I participating in this event? Why did I not boycott? I'm here in part because I do see a distinction between the Giller Prize and Scotiabank. I understand why arts organizations seek funding and partnerships with corporations and banks. In general, I feel there is no purity in this world. I claim none for myself. As I note in my novel, I think we're all making compromises, whether we're aware of them or not, in this hyper-capitalist system. My hope is that this recent conversation surrounding the Giller's funding will prompt those who run the prize and the foundation to re-examine the ways it supports writers and books. I'm also here because I want to embrace the chances when they arise to speak in conversation, human to human, about the state of the world, about books, about anything that comes up. I definitely don't think we should leave all the discourse to social media because it's designed to encourage outrage. It often results in conversations that feel siloed or limited to ideologically similar groups. So I want to embrace the possibilities of being in conversation with Rebecca and of taking audience questions. Okay, sorry, it's going on. Also, I agreed to participate today because I was assured by those behind the Giller Prize that nothing I say would be edited or censored. There has been some questions raised about censorship other writers experienced. I am not speaking to their experience. I am not contradicting their experience. I'm just noting my own. And I wanted to speak at this event in part because I was curious, not at all certain, but curious about the opportunity to be honest with the reading public, who may or may not be aware of these issues, and with Giller representatives present, about the art washing that happens in Canada. As Josiah Newfield noted in The Walrus, banks and corporations use artists' work to mask their actions and to burnish their reputations. So I felt I could also perhaps add in a small way to the conversation regarding Scotiabank, because my novel is one that I think is about climate crisis, anxiety, and grief. I felt it was my obligation to note that Scotiabank is also Canada's second largest funder of fossil fuels. So many before me have noted the connection between war and environmental destruction. I don't think the two issues are separate. In 2022, Scotiabank invested $29.5 billion US dollars in fossil fuel projects, and their net zero research fund is only $10 million. So you can see the problem. Most of all, I want to just be clear that I don't know if my choice to appear today is the right choice, right or wrong. I take responsibility for this choice, and by no means do I diminish the choice of other writers when they boycott it. I unequivocally support and celebrate their right to do so. And also wanted to note briefly that I'm receiving a $250 honorarium for appearing tonight. I will be donating $500 to the United Nations Population Fund. It's an organization close to my heart because it supports maternal and infant health in Gaza and other areas around the world. And just as a final note, thank you if you've stuck through this with me the whole way. I just want to say, quite sincerely, I'm not optimistic right now about the state of this global civilization and our planet, but to lose optimism is not the same as losing hope. So I was compelled to write my novel because of the rage and the heartbreak I was feeling at the state of our world. And I had the great privilege of a writing practice that allowed me to metabolize this darkness that I saw around me, to sort of, I felt like I could bring it into my body and then express it in a way that might connect with readers. I really believe writing is an act of communication, sometimes even communion with readers. I'm grateful to all my readers. I just feel that writing is an act of hope. Writing a book is an act of trust in the future, in human empathy, and in human connection. So it's in that spirit of hope that compelled me to appear here today. And it's with a wish for connection, even or especially in the face of differing views, that brings me to this gathering. And I just want to thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Deborah. I think, these are conversations that we've all been having in so many ways. And in terms of events like this, that constant conversation of which is louder, our silence or our voices, which makes the bigger impact. Just, showing up and speaking about the issues at hand, in some cases, really does feel like the right move. That's why I'm here today as well. So, first of all, let's talk about, okay. Uh, it's going to sound for a moment like we're moving in a completely different direction, but to anyone who knows the book, of course, we're not. But I will say, one of my kids saw the book Girlfriend on Mars sitting around in my office a few months ago and picked it up and said, "Is this literally about a guy whose girlfriend goes to Mars?" And I said, "Yes, it is." Um, and I said, "Of course, it's about a lot of other stuff too." It's literally about a guy whose girlfriend goes, yeah. Um, Although that was a heteronormative assumption. I don't know, but it is. And I think that if I were trying to hook someone on this book for the first time, that is certainly what I'd start with. It's right there in the title. But then I'd very quickly start to talk about the more serious aspects of the book as well. So what I'm wondering is, can you talk a little bit, and at certain points we're going to have to kind of maybe summarize briefly the plot of the book, which you're going to be able to do a better chance of than I am, and maybe this is that time. But I'm wondering if you could talk about the intersection in this book of entertainment and very serious issues. And of course, that happens within the book. We have this reality TV show that this young woman, Amber, is on, competing to be one of the people on this manned mission to Mars, from which she will never return. Um, and you have that idea of sort of the fun of reality TV. But you also have the devastating effect on her, specifically boyfriend, other people who know her who are going to be left behind if she wins this opportunity. And you also have the very, very serious reasons that she wants to leave the planet Earth. And I'm curious for you too, in the writing, you have this, what seems on the surface like this fun idea for a novel, and it is fun, but then you are putting some spinach in those brownies. So I'm wondering how that happened for you, and if you could talk about that combination of elements.
Yeah, I think that it was actually really, for me, it just felt like, of course, this is the book I'm going to write. This book came really quickly for me, so like in a way I didn't question it. It came really slowly in the sense that I wrote a short story 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, with that same premise, and then I held it in the back of my mind for 7 years, and then sat down. In between then I failed to write at least two novels. I feel like I'm blocking another one out, but maybe I write three. And then truly was like, I'm 2 years late on my novel deadline. I need to write a novel. Now I have 3 weeks set aside of my life to work on a book, so I'm gonna have to write a novel in 3 weeks. So I did, which is
Oh my
insane.
God. Okay, just for anyone else out there who's not a writer, that's not a thing.
No,
Nobody does that.
it will never happen again. I just like it. It was almost devastating because it was this amazing experience of writing like 4,000 words a day. I had Googled it's such a like modern writing story where I Googled how short can a novel be, and then I was like, okay, I have a 10,000 word short story. It was all starting to click in my mind of how I could expand it into a novel. It was all coming at once, and I was like, okay, I have to get to 50,000 words. So I wrote a much different, or not much different, but much shorter draft, in 3 weeks, and it was, yeah, I've never, like, my brain would hurt at the end of every day, and
Oh, yeah.
I was at a writing residency, so I
That
had
helps
help.
so much, right? You have nothing else to do. You can
Yeah,
just do the mental juggling. And of course, when we say 3 weeks, we mean 3 weeks to the end of the
the draft.
lumpy first draft, right? Not, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
No.
for me, like the darkness and the lightness, like it just exploded out of me. Um, and then later on, I started to see, oh, like, uh-oh, I think like when publishers started to market it, I was like, oh no, like when they're leaning too heavy on the, or what I felt was a bit too heavy on the reality TV or the Mars element, then readers are going in with expectations that are not being met, because then like the last third of the book is really heavy.
Mhm.
And then, at the same time, I was also concerned, like I was like, I do think of myself as a literary writer with like serious concerns. So I want that to be an element of how we present the book, but I also want people to know like they're allowed to laugh, and and it's supposed to be like fun and move quickly and so on. So
Mhm.
I guess my idea was that like I pull people in with like humor and a plot that I thought moved quickly. Lots of people don't think
I thought
that's
it moved very fast.
thanks. And yeah, and then I noticed like a bait and switch isn't always what readers want, so it hasn't always gone over well. But for me, it really came down to like this basic way of coping with a very difficult, dark world, which is like
Yeah.
you actually really do need to find ways to laugh and enjoy life when you can.
Yeah. One problem that I have with many novels about climate change, cli-fi as we often call it, is they're just this very somber tone, very slow moving, um, often deeply, deeply depressing because you're reading about a world where everything has already happened. So you're reading about it after the fact, and it's like this is the bleak version, the bleak vision of our future. We need to hear that. We absolutely need to talk about those things. Um, but someone who loves to read, is obviously passionate about literature, who cares very, very deeply about the environment. I'm not that inclined usually to pick up a book when I see that it's about climate change. And of course, in this case, that's one of the many things your book is about. I would not say, here, read this, it's a climate book. It's simply one of the vegetables in the brownies. But something like this, I didn't come away, to speak, to your comment earlier about optimism versus hope. I did not come away feeling hopeless. I did not come away feeling like that book simply made me sad, right? It was heavy, but I felt entertained, and I felt I don't know, it was so thought provoking. There was so much to think about that wasn't just shame on all of us, although
Yeah,
that's part of it too.
yeah, it is, and I feel, but yeah, it's interesting because I do feel like, um, I mean, I wrote the first draft when Trump was president. So life felt very absurd. And, and yeah, we like cli-fi or climate fiction, or, you know, people, when we talk about climate change, we're talking about it all wrong, because we're talking about it as if it's the future when actually it's the present.
Right.
And it's the present, not just for people on like low-lying island nations anymore. It's everywhere. We were just talking before this event about like my city has been in a drought for years, and now there's been a water main break, and now our mayor is daily basically telling us that if we don't conserve water, we will one day turn on the tap in the next month or so, and no water will come out.
Mhm.
So that's just one of many, many examples of everything that's going on now. And so I kind of like, there's a sci-fi element to the book where we're in a present that's a bit altered because a billionaire is actually sending people to Mars right now. But
Yeah.
basically, it's our world with all our like absurdities and our, like I said in my statement, our compromises, which are like so shameful and embarrassing, and also necessary. And that, like, all of that, I think there's a kind of like a dark humor that is
Yeah.
sometimes present in our daily lives, in our actual present.
Well, there's an absurdity for sure, right? And I think that's something that really good satire. I hesitate to call your book satire because that's not, I don't think that's what it is, but there's a satiric element to it. And really good satire does not just come out of left field. It takes what is real, tweaks it just enough to the point where you think, oh, that would never happen, and then you go, oh, but that's what is happening.
Mhm.
And that is exactly what you're doing.
Yeah,
You're, you know,
I mean, the writing of the book, because I wrote it in this strange way, when I was stuck, what I would do is I would read the news. And then I would see something just so disturbing, so absurd, so like I just couldn't fathom what was happening, and I would think, oh, okay, and then I would jump back into the book.
Yeah.
So yeah, the present world's absurdity and like painful, horrible absurdity was really present.
Yeah. Well, and one of those absurd elements that you're kind of getting at is this billionaire who is funding all of this and who we get to, at first he's kind of this shadowy figure. Later on, he becomes really three-dimensional in the book. Um, and I mean, I think you've done a great job of like, it's not quite Elon Musk and it's not quite Jeff Bezos, and it's like he's his own thing. Um, but I wonder if you could talk a little bit about um, specifically the choice to put a face to this giant corporation, right? Because one way to write this book would have been to say it's many nameless, faceless people who are running this, and they are funding a mission to Mars. And instead, you've chosen one person, which, of course, I think makes for a better book, but also speaks to this, sort of cult of celebrity that we have in real life around some of these people running, funding, doing some of this absolutely bizarre stuff, very damaging stuff often. Um, and I think there's something in the fact that it's a human that you can laugh at, or oh, he got divorced and this happened, that makes it seem less scary, and that might not be a good thing. So I wonder if you can talk about, deciding to put this one billionaire in charge of things within your book, and then how you crafted him as a character and how you saw his role in the novel.
Yeah, it was interesting because I wrote the short story and it was more like what you mentioned, like it was kind of just a shadowy corporation that was running the reality show that would send people to Mars. And then like almost 10 years went by and I felt like this sort of the billionaires became even more in our faces. And now there's an actually like my dad just quoted the number of billionaires to me in the world and it was an absurd amount of billionaires that exist. And I wish I could remember the actual number, but yeah, I just felt like in those intervening years, the like economic inequality did increase, and also for whatever reason, a lot of these billionaires were just in our faces a lot, and especially with their rockets. So yeah,
Yes.
that I kind of couldn't help but shift that, and that helped me to really actually kind of start to understand what the novel was about, which is also about this chasing of celebrity. So Amber, the main character, or one of the main characters, she's good at social media and she's pretty and she's white and she's just sort of built for and she's competitive. So she's built for this reality show and she's built for the celebrity ecosystem. And I mean, I was thinking a lot about it's not just the billionaires or the celebrities who are engaging. We all kind of see it and feel it in each other and in among ourselves. This kind of that was one of the big absurdities to me is like we're like standing here watching the end of the world and at the same time worrying so much about how we are presenting ourselves. So it's normal, it's human. I'm not saying that with judgment, but I wanted to explore that kind of
Yeah.
dynamic.
Yeah. Well, and I think I keep saying the things that I love about your book. This is just your fan club here, like tonight. But one of the many things that the book does well is it doesn't come out with like a thesis statement about this guy or this corporation, or it's you definitely come away with a sense of what the book feels, what these characters feel, perhaps what the author feels. But it's really getting in there and just, I think, asking questions. It's asking really articulate questions and then taking those questions and picking them apart and asking more questions. Um, you know, Early on in the book, it would be tempting to see Amber as very, very vain for undertaking this project. And then you get in there and it starts to get more complicated than that. And you start to think, oh no, maybe she's right. But then you start to question that. And um, I think in all of these, it's never heavy-handed, which is really fantastic.
Great to hear. I mean, I really, as a writer, I think like it's so important, and I think like you probably feel this as a fiction writer too. Like, it's like you have to kind of, with Amber, it was difficult for me. I had to figure out, why would somebody be interested in doing this at all? Like, how could she not see through it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I started thinking about her background. She's got this, this background as an Olympian. She's got this kind of overbearing father that she's trying to impress. And she was raised in this like quite religious extremist environment. So I started thinking about all that, and I still couldn't get her. And then I started to think, actually, it's interesting that we're at this Giller event. I started to think about what it is like to be a writer. And I thought, every prize season that rolls around in Canada, I don't know what it's like in the States. In Canada, you just sit there and you just think, God, please, can my book be on a prize list, please? Because that's the
Right.
only way. That is the only way your book is going to get much attention.
Mhm.
Um, and it's really engenders this like winner takes all mentality,
Yeah.
which I don't
Yeah.
think it's just definitely not good for writers. I don't know what it's like for readers, but I will say
Yeah.
it's not good for our mental health. And so that, like, when I tuned into that, I was like, okay, I'm thinking of this character as someone who's totally foreign to me, when actually I have felt those same competitive, uh, like, like emotions that I probably wouldn't want to like share.
Yeah.
Don't
Well,
impress me.
also the idea, I mean, it's not, when you embark on a novel, it is not taking off for another planet with no hope of return in your lifetime, but you are kind of like, I'm gonna go do this bizarre thing that no one else is gonna understand for a really long time. So there's that too.
That's true. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, you're just going to this other place for years and years, and you can't really tell people about it, and you can't
Yeah,
tell them exactly why you want to go there.
right,
Yeah.
right. And do you ever come back really from the novel? I don't know. Maybe you stay there forever. Um, yeah. Well, I'm wondering if I keep asking you questions forever, but I was hoping that you might read to us a little bit from the book to give people who have not read it yet a taste of their next reading journey, hopefully. And meanwhile, please remember for everyone in the audience that the Q&A is open, and we'll spend the last 15 minutes or so doing that. So if you want to type questions into the Q&A, this would be a great time as well.
Thanks so much. Okay, I will just read some of the opening pages. So the novel is written in two points of view, Kevin and Amber. Kevin is, well, you'll see when we get set up, as he's Amber's girlfriend. And this is from his point of view. Amber Kivinen, drug dealer, lapsed evangelical Christian, my girlfriend of 14 years, is going to Mars. This is real. This is what I've been told. Flashback, interior, day, 3 months ago. Amber sat beside me on the Voyager. Hey, Kev. She tucked a blonde curl behind her ear. You busy? Me, clearly not busy, wondering if I looked as stoned as I felt, said, What's up? That curl bounced into her face again. She tucked it again. I have to tell you something. I expected the something to be that she wanted to adopt a cat, or that she wished I would get a real job, or that she'd made out with a guitarist or a guy who writes graphic novels. I did not expect her to say that she would soon be on television in a Survivor meets Star Trek amalgam, where she would compete for one of 2 seats on the Mars Now mission. I did not expect her to say that within the year she would hopefully strap herself into a rocket and blast into deep space, where she would float for 9 months like a fetus in a womb before landing on the iron-rich red dirt of Mars. That she would then use the frozen water in the planet's crust to grow her own food and produce her own oxygen. And she would stay on Mars forever, because the technology to come home doesn't exist yet. And even if it did, even if the technology existed, even if she wanted to come back, she couldn't. Her muscle and bone density would have decreased so drastically that that Earth's gravity would crush her to powder. She confessed all this while sitting next to me on our green IKEA bedding couch in our basement suite off Commercial Drive. She used the same voice as she had when she told me last year about hooking up with a guy we sometimes sell to, a computer programmer / skateboarder named Braden. She accidentally went down on him on that green couch, one of our first purchases together. The couch we named the Voyager because we've taken our best trips on it. So, she spoke quietly and looked at the constellation of confusion that was my face. This is probably a bit weird for you? I wondered if I was more stoned than I thought. I waited for her to laugh. I mean, she chattered, it's not dangerous or anything. Mostly the ship will be remote controlled by people in New Mexico. It's sort of like a drone. Aren't drones notoriously inaccurate? I said. And what about aerobraking? What about solar radiation? How did I even know those words? From hours of sitting on this very couch in a nostalgic stupor, watching Star Trek The Next Generation. Will you do something for me? Amber took my head in her hands. Will you be a little bit happy for me for like 1 second? Because I made it to the third round, and that's kind of a big deal. Since when were you in the first round? And do they know you're a drug dealer? We're not drug dealers. We specialize in hydroponics, which, by the way, will be the technology used to grow food on Mars. By the way, I said, we sell drugs. I'll stop there.
Amazing. I mean, it's like, it just keeps making me laugh. I've read it at least twice now, all the way through, and then looking back, as we were, uh, because when you judge something, you read things many times, and it still just makes me laugh. I love it. We were talking a little bit about who she needed to be, which I think is just that's one of my favorite topics, especially when I am teaching and I'm talking to my students about writing character, talking about almost reverse engineering the character that you need for the situation that you need them to get into. Some people I know do it other ways, like a character just comes and appears to them and whispers in their ear and is real, and then they have to figure out what that character can get up to. But I always start with plot, and it sounds like with this one, you kind of started with plot.
Yeah.
So there's, you have on the one hand Amber, who is, so driven and so, you did, a great job a minute ago of explaining all the things you needed her to be. And then we have Kevin, and I think, Kevin's in the first person, but Amber's in the third person, right?
That's
Yeah.
right.
So we're closer to Kevin in a way. He starts the novel that always gets us on someone's side. He owns the title that gets us on someone's side, right? Um, and you must have been thinking a lot, about the contrasts between these two people, but you still needed them to be people who could feasibly romantically have been together, even if they've changed. So can you talk about that? And, I mean, I'm asking you like 5 questions in one, but making these two central characters, making the people you needed, but also the people who were believable together. And then that choice maybe to go with first for Kevin, but third for Amber, which puts her at just that slight bit more of remove, which I think works really well. But I'm really curious to hear how you thought about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting to write them because I felt sort of like I was just writing these two sides of myself, and they're so like and exaggerating those sides, and they are so opposite. Like one of the reasons that I didn't write the novel for a very long time was because I was like, how can I write a novel about a character, Kevin, who doesn't leave his apartment ever?
Yeah.
Uh, and then there were a few sort of other works that gave me some courage in that regard. And also I remembered this sort of piece of wisdom that a writing teacher had said before that was to me earlier, like when I was very young. If you have a problem in your writing and you can't solve it, maybe you just have to, he didn't use the word lean in because no one was saying that then, but like you lean into it and
Yes.
admit it to
Yes.
the reader. And so I was like, okay, I've been trying to think of ways to get him out of the apartment. I've been trying to think of things he could do, go out in the world and do. But actually, I'm just going to lean into this. He's just going to stay in the apartment the whole time. That's a challenge I'm setting myself as a writer. And it really felt like there is a part of me all the time that wants to go out and wants to get things done, and another part of me that wants to just like hide under a blanket basically all day every day. So yeah, it felt a little bit like I could explore those two sides of myself, and it felt pretty natural. And
Yeah.
these characters were really easy for me to write. When you said like, do you ever come home when you write a novel, do you ever come back from that? And I feel like I'm like grieving this novel forever because the
Yeah.
characters were so strangely close to me.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, writing a novel like, and you feel like that, and then a lot of readers are like, these characters are so unlikable.
Oh God, right. Of course. Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
which is partly, I think, sometimes because we're extracting the parts of ourselves that we struggle with,
Mhm.
So like the part of me that never wants to leave home and turning that into a whole person. Well, yeah, that's right. And the part of me that wants to like take
Yeah.
off and go to Mars. Yeah. Like it's also, I think both of them are so relatable, just given the time when this was written and when it, appeared so relatable for coming out of COVID, people who are like, I've discovered that I never want to go leave my house again, and people who are like, life is short. I need to make changes. I need to get out of here. I need to do things.
It was actually really interesting to me because I had been working on a historical fiction for years and just failed miserably at it. So one of the things that was so exciting to me about writing this novel is I was like, I don't have to research how they like did up their shoes. I can just
Yes.
write my characters and figure out the story. And then the sort of complications of that came later. You just reminded me, like when then COVID hit and everybody was inside for years, and so I felt like I had to sort of rejig the book a bit, make it much more obviously set in like 2018, 2019, which was challenging. So it's set now, but not quite now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had to do that again when Russia invaded Ukraine. And
Oh,
I was like,
huh.
oh, are Russia and the US going to work together in terms of space exploration anymore? And then most recently, I just changed one paragraph in the paperback edition because of the war in Gaza that we opened with mentioning, because I have a character who served in the IDF, and I felt like when I reread his character, I was like, I think as a character, I think as a human being, he makes sense. I don't,
Yeah.
but it's not clear that he's no longer serving in the IDF, and now there's
Mm.
so many implications. So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it was so interesting to me that I was like, this is easy. I just write about today's world, but today's world is changing so fast, and today's
that's
world,
it.
it's yeah, yeah. There's like complications with that too.
Yeah, I think it's impossible to set something just now-ish anymore unless you're really going to avoid engaging with politics and global events. And a book like this, that's part of what it's doing. Right? She's choosing to leave this planet behind. Well, which planet? Which Earth is it that she's leaving? We need to know, or, Earth 2018, Earth 2020, which one?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like, I mean, I took out, like, because I told you I was writing this, the first draft, it had so much stuff about Trump in it. And then a few years went by and I started reading fiction that had been, similar to me, this feeling of like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe this, like monsters and like, you know,
Hmm.
everywhere all the time. And then I started reading fiction and it felt strange. It felt really strange to read about this larger than life character in fiction.
Yeah.
So I pulled all that out. So like it was also interesting to try to make choices about what to include in terms of contemporary politics, not so much
Yeah.
issues, politics.
That's interesting, right? Because yeah, once you start, to what extent are you just kind of gesturing at the rest of it by association?
Uh,
And to what extent do you feel like you want to enumerate?
I
Yeah,
mean, it was difficult even with the like celebrity element because the book is so much about celebrity. So there's like celebrity gossip in the book.
right.
I know like an embarrassing amount about celebrities. So I was like, might as well use this. But then later I was like, God, it's fun to make fun of James Franco, but does this really belong in the book? And the James Franco one did. But
Amazing. Amazing. He's so easy. He's such an easy target.
yeah, I
I feel
know.
like you'd kind of appreciate it too? Yeah.
I was like, is this going to be dated? It won't be.
No, never, never. Amazing. I love it. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit, and actually this is the time when I also like remind you that to get your questions in now. Um, but I'm wondering if you can talk about the short story that it sprang from. Because I didn't know that before tonight. And I've had that happen as well. In my case, it was a failed short story that I turned into a novel rather than a successful one, which I think helped because it was like, oh, I can, there was nothing precious to cling to. I've also had the opposite of like what I thought would be a novel turning into a short story. But can you talk about what it looked like when it was a short story, and then the work involved in building up and in letting go and in making those changes? It's not just going in and adding extra words. There's so much more.
Yeah, I mean, the plot really expanded, but I do feel like the story, it's like kind of like the spine running down the middle of the book. And then there's at a certain point, the book kind of, it's almost like there's the spine and then there's a part that has nothing to do, like you would not find any of that in the short story. And then the ending, like the kernel of the ending is in the short
I
story.
thought it might have been. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I in this way, I feel like I was so lucky that I felt still like I had that ending that I was writing towards. There's no way I could
Yeah.
have written a draft that fast without that.
That
Um,
makes a lot of sense. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Right. So you're not writing into the unknown. You really have
yeah.
this. Is
And
the
I think I had
wording? Okay, go ahead.
similar. I mean, the ending of the story is actually quite different because they're together at the end. They're together on Earth. I guess I shouldn't give away the ending of this one, but uh, it's quite different. But there is a kind of like there's a kind of overlap, and yeah, so I knew the ending I was writing towards, and it was a very strange writing experience for me because when I write stories I kind of start in anywhere and I just write a scene, and then like it becomes like a constellation and I connect it all, whereas this was like an amazing experience of starting at the beginning. The first words of the story and the first words of the novel are very similar, and then I just kind of started running. Yeah.
Amazing. Do you feel like you like if so the story came out when? When did you write the story?
2013, I think. I
2013.
wrote it
Yeah.
in 2013. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think you would be the like 2013 version of you if you suddenly were delivered this finished novel? What, besides the fact that you wrote a novel, what do you think you would be the most surprised by? And I mean, in terms of the text, in terms of the changes and all of
Um,
that.
I mean, in a way, I think Me Too features pretty prominently in the plot and to do with the
Yeah.
billionaire. And so yeah, it's just I couldn't have written the novel back then. And I think also there was like a lot of my adult life has just been like waking up from my own naivete. I think we all experienced that, maybe like in various ways, Black Lives Matter maybe, or another one for me was the environmental crises that were involved in. And like I was like, it can't be so bad. Like we wouldn't do that to ourselves. We wouldn't destroy our only home. So I
Mm,
had a kind of block, and then somehow that block fell away and I
yeah.
like understood the truth of it, and still don't know what to do about the truth of it, but yeah, that like I needed to go through that kind of journey of allowing the truth in to be able to write this book, I feel. And I think actually writing the book was part of that journey, like having these characters feel that a lot of it, I feel like there's a lot of like anxiety about it in the book, or Amber, she wants to leave the planet because she's really, really scared. And
Yeah.
it was also for a way of me dealing with that futile wish for like sanctuary or safety. Like if I could just find a place that's not like damaged, then I and my people could be safe. And like this bunker mentality I think is everywhere, and Mars, the billionaire Mars obsession is the most like the grandest of all that bunker mentality. So I
Yeah.
had to also confront my own wish for like I just want to find a perfect safe place.
Yeah. Yeah. That's yeah, and a reminder for because everyone here presumably is a reader, a reminder that when you order from Amazon, that's what you're funding is this guy's rockets to Mars, rather, rather than shopping and supporting it in an independent bookstore. So just a reminder. Um,
Reminder.
um, so do you think that you are a novelist now? I mean, of course you're a novelist, you wrote a novel, but I mean, do you think that you um feel like this is the thing you're going to keep doing? Are you going to always write short stories? Are you going to, or was this a one-time venture?
Writing a stories, well, like it's an amazing, it's like there's a lot of freedom. And then also that, like, I do recall it took me 8 years to write my second book of stories, 7 years to write the first. And like, because you're building an entire world, and then 30 pages later you're building another world, like it's super
Yeah.
challenging. And in some ways I really enjoyed the fact that I was just building one world. And I also felt like I was so immersed, and that was really like just really enjoyable. So I would love to write another novel. Right now, like I spend most of my time with my young child, and like I'm barely writing at all. Um, it seems somehow like so I'm sort of enraged and want to write all the time, and also feel sort of like some like my life and the way the world is right now is kind of pushing me towards taking some time away, taking some space and silence. Uh,
Mm.
so yeah, again, I'm divided. But I would love to
Yeah,
write a novel. One of my friends once said like writing novels is addictive, and now
yeah.
I can see what she means.
That's the thing. This is why I'm wondering, because it's funny for me, like my story collection was my third book. I had two novels, but in reality, I'd been writing stories forever before that first book came out. And yeah, there's something I still write stories too, and I'm sure you probably always will, but they're yeah, it's like this completely just I think for the same reason that people love to read novels. Imagine, like you're
Mhm.
reading a novel, but really full throttle for like years, is what it feels like to write one. Yes, it's hard to give up. I mean, I understand taking space for yourself, but I really hope you don't stay silent for
Thank
long
you.
because we need your voice and I want more books.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. We have one question already in the chat, and we'd love to see more. And I'm going to have to paraphrase this because I think we don't want to give spoilers about the ending. So I'm just going to be kind of cryptic, and you can be kind of cryptic in your answer, I think. But Susan is saying, loved your book, and I'm enjoying this discussion. And then asking, there's a moment in the book when Amber could accept help, but refuses, and she is wondering if you can maybe speak to that. And like I said, I think you can answer that as cryptically as you want, knowing that there are people in the audience who either are halfway through or
Yeah,
um
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's called Girlfriend on Mars, so I don't think it's giving it away too much to say that she does go to Mars. And part of my thinking is that outside of our habitat,
yeah,
we without our, our microbiome and our oxygen to breathe and all of that stuff, even if you can survive under a dome, you're not going to thrive, and mentally, physically, emotionally, you're going to be altered and not likely in a great way. And certainly I don't think that the two who go to Mars have had enough preparation to be able to prepare them emotionally and mentally for what they're about to go through. So that was a big part of my thinking. And, and it's really interesting to me because just this notion, I just actually wrote, I guess I'm writing a bit. I wrote an essay about giving up, just talking about giving up writing and giving up, what does it mean to give something up as a kind of short-term thing, a sacrifice or what, anyway. So I was thinking about this concept, and I was thinking about my dad, who's dealing with health issues and who has said to me, like basically said, I will not give up. My job is to be here with you as long as I can be with you and with my granddaughters and my grandson and my wife, and to be here. And my partner's dad, who recently chose assisted dying because of severe chronic pain. So we have these two fathers in our lives who have chosen these two different
yeah,
um, ways. And I was so struck by like the bravery of both choices.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that one, you could call it giving up, but it's so brave. And the other, you know, you could call it brave for different reasons because it's staying. So yeah, I guess my feeling too about Amber is that she goes on a real like inner journey at the end that I found really brave.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, because now that you've given that slight spoiler, I did not believe she was going to go to Mars. I was reading that book and I was like, there's no way. I'm like, she can't pull that off. There's no way she's actually going to send her. Clearly, this is going to end some other way. And if she does get to Mars, it's going to be like at the very end of the book, so we don't even know what happens there. And then you did it like whatever, two-thirds, three-quarters, whatever of the way in. I was like, oh my God, what's she gonna do now? And I was like, it was like me thinking like a writer, you know, like
Right.
it's like a magician watching another person's magic show, and you're like, like, you can't do that. Oh my God, how did you do that? So
I
I
did feel
absolutely
that way writing it too. Like once I was like, oh no, what do I do now?
I'm
What?
sure. Oh my
Yeah,
God,
yeah.
I'm sure. And it
Um,
sounds like in the story she did not get there, or she, okay, yeah. So yeah, wow. I mean, I seriously can't believe you pulled it off.
oh,
Amazing.
thanks.
Um, okay, so we have another question from Hélène, which is, I haven't read your book yet, but I'm intrigued by how influenced you are by what's happening in our world. Has that always impacted your writing and creativity, or started more when you had that realization about how pressing these issues are?
Um, yeah, I would say it's changed. I think it's changed a lot for me because when I was sort of starting as a writer, my only ambition was to be able to write like a beautiful short story. And my hero is still Alice Munro. I'm like, she's kind of my North Star as a writer. And um, so I wrote these kind of quiet short stories, and like I would say mostly about relationships, attachment issues, like people trying to really figure out the personal. And of course, like as Audre Lorde said, the personal is political, but I was not. I was a pretty like privileged kid who wasn't thinking along those lines. And yeah, so the world changed and it changed me, I guess. And then this book is so different than uh anything I ever thought I would write. Yeah, it really like it surprised me. And yeah, I really wanted to bring Monroe into this kind of like wacky
I think
satirical
you
sci-fi
did.
thing, but
That's
I
what,
want to bring like psychological depth in there if I could,
that's
like
what I was
not.
gonna say. Yeah, I think all that work that you did, all the stories you wrote that were the more introspective or more personal, more psychological, that's why you're able then in the middle of something that's otherwise, it's got this kind of big splashy plot. But you're able to go into, yeah, like those moments of personal revolution that um I'm always looking for in her stories, and that yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's what I look for as a reader too. Like if it doesn't have that element, I'm not going to be as engaged or held by the book. So
right.
yeah, it
Yeah,
felt like yeah, I hope that I was actually just recently rereading some of her stories that had been years and years, and I was just like, oh my gosh, yes, like there's still so much to learn from this for
yeah,
anything that we write, nonfiction, stories, novels, whatever.
yeah. Yeah. I yeah, I mean, she never gets old rereading her.
Yeah.
Rereading Alice Munro never gets old. Um, I had like, as you were talking, I had like three different questions I wanted to ask you, and they're all gone. The thing that I didn't say at the top of the hour is that I'm really sick with a sinus infection, so I'm like half as articulate and on top of things as I
I feel
otherwise
like, I mean, part of why I also don't write is because I've just been like sick nonstop. Like my toddler, her game that she thinks is the funniest thing in the world is just pry my mouth open and try to lick my teeth. So
Oh
like,
my
I've just
God.
been sick. I'm just never not sick because she like licks the floor and then she licks my teeth. So
Oh,
yeah,
I hope that gives you the
I'm
best
sorry for you. I
immunity.
know.
Oh
You're
my God. Oh my God. I know what actually I did remember what I was going to say, which is that every once in a while I'm so tempted to read something light that's, like I know it's going to be pure frivolity, right? And I think I've been reading such heavy stuff. I'm just going to pick up this like romance, romp, whatever, thriller that's not coming with the like smart people are also saying that it says smart things, just like this looks like candy. And this is a me problem. I know this is a me problem. I'm so bored. I'm not saying that as like that probably sounds like some terrible humble brag. I genuinely wish, because I enjoy the hell out of trashy reality TV. I enjoy the stupidest stuff on the screen, and I just can't with the books. They like what it is, it's like they lack propulsion for me if I don't know what's going on in someone's head. So I actually get bored. It's not that I'm sitting there going, this is beneath me. It's that I actually get bored because I don't know what people are thinking.
That's
And
so, yeah.
Right? And you've done that so well. Like this is a plot that absolutely in other hands would have just been like would have leaned in so much harder to the humor, to the at the expense of everything else, or leaned in only to the plot at the expense of the psychological. Um, and so what this is, I think the last thing I really want to ask you is just, we talked before about the balance between, the story and the politics between the two characters. Um, but can you talk? I mean, we touched on all of this, but maybe part of the reason I'm asking this is like as a summation of some of what we've talked about. But can you talk about the balance between light and dark um, in a book like this, right? The balance between like it is fun, there is the humor, and there's the darkness. And when do you switch it on? When do you switch it off? When do you know you've gone too far in one direction? When do you worry that it's not the same book anymore? And how would you want a reader to feel at the end of the book?
I was so happy that you said you felt hopeful at the end of the book, because I know the ending is very dark, and I have heard from some readers who were like, I just couldn't go with you there. Like it was too
Mhm.
much of a switch and it was too hard. Um and but I didn't like I actually wanted sort of I hadn't articulated it like that to myself yet, or hadn't read enough that to articulate it to myself at that point. But that kind of difference between optimism and hope, and hope comes out of this kind of journey into the darkness, and actually that it's a more solid, grounded thing than
Right.
optimism, because it comes out of actually encountering real grief. And so I that was my real hope for the book, although I don't think that I like consciously knew that. I think that I was kind of going, or I was beginning a sort of journey like that as I wrote. And that's like,
Yeah.
I guess I was saying at the beginning, like it's this great privilege to have a writing practice that allows you to like think with your like straight. I find it's like thinking with my body in a way,
Yeah.
even though we think we're all up here as writers, but like actually you're sort of following an instinct or
Yeah.
your gut or something.
Well,
Um,
think about when we dream. That is our subconscious telling us stories all night. That is not the conscious mind. And it comes from the deepest parts of us. And they're very often the stories we need. We're telling ourselves those stories because we need to hear them. And I think fiction can work the exact same way.
yeah, yeah, and I don't want to suggest that like I wrote the book and think, it's just therapy that I just put out there. It's like
Yeah.
obviously, then I revised it a million times and I tried to make it crafted and so on. But I do also think like I remember Jonathan Franzen reading a quote of his saying like if your book didn't take you on a journey, then I don't want to read it. And I
Yeah.
totally, I feel that
Yeah.
as a writer. And that's sort of what you were saying too. Like if we're not like going deep, then I'm gonna like just actually naturally be bored.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't sure that I'd hit the balance of light and dark, but
Yeah.
I am happy that it has like
Yeah.
worked for some
For me,
readers.
you did, and I think going lighter would have felt like putting a false happy ending on things, or would have felt, like it was betraying some of the causes that it was speaking to. So for me, it was perfect. I love this book so much. I'll end by we have one question here that's just a comment from Brad, which is, Deborah, you made an interesting talk, twice as good with your initial statement. Thank you. I agree. And just, I think that statement, as well as our conversation, is such a reminder that we don't
Oh
write in a vacuum. We
my God.
Oh, you're still here. We can still hear you and see you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no,
My
I don't know no, you're good. You're good. So I was just saying, this whole conversation is such a reminder that we don't write in a vacuum. We write both, we write for the world. We also write from the world, and we write about the world, and we write with the world. And in this case, you wrote away from the world, which I loved.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
then it made me appreciate our planet so much more. I mean, just
Yeah.
researching Mars, I was like, wow, what a nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I'm yeah, really, really happy that we have this amazing Earth.
Yeah.
All
Right.
right.
Well, thank you both so much. for this conversation. This was wonderful. I know that my understanding of your novel, Deborah, has definitely been enriched because of this. I hope everybody else in the audience agrees with me, and I hope and thank you all for coming tonight. Just a couple of quick reminders before we go. So this interview will be available on our YouTube channel over the next couple of days. So if you wanted to revisit this conversation or know somebody who might want to check it out, just please make sure to let them know. Also, if you haven't already, please make sure to sign up on our website for our mailing list to make sure you keep up to date with all things Giller. Otherwise, this is our last book club of 2024. So apart from thanking everybody in the audience for being here tonight, I just want to give a big thank you to everybody who's been supporting these book clubs throughout the year. I'm sure I speak for everybody at the Giller, as well as all of the authors who have been involved in this when I say that we're so, so grateful for the support and attention you provide that allows for these book clubs to be possible. I hope you all have a wonderful summer ahead of you and a great rest of your evening. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much.